Oh, so you're able to build in context
Uh,
behind the data for your environment. Whereas like Purview is kind of like cut and dry, where it's like, is it sensitive data or is it not? Does it include a social security number or does it not? You know, it
oh, yeah,
doesn't even care like where it goes or where it lives. It's just kind of cut and dry like that.
exactly. And we provide a very smart summary. So let's say this is how we are looking at an activity. So what I'm sharing right now is an activity analysis. So everything that we analyze is presented in the system as an activity, and then you look at the overall risk of that particular activity. You can look at the content that was, you can look at who sent this email to which recipients, and then you can look at the content. What's more interesting is, let me go back to the overview tab. You can, in one shot, look at the various policies that were applied. So you can look at customer trust, for example, which again brings in those relationship aspects. Whether the customer that I'm sending this email to, am I mentioning at other customers with whom I may have NDA with? Thereby, I'm violating that trust that I have with the other customer, for example, that I'm referring to. The intellectual property, am I discussing anything sensitive with this customer that I don't have NDA with? And then obviously the set of checks that you would provide, or check for example, privacy. But even within privacy, for instance, traditional data security DLP players will look at privacy. Hey, is there a social security number or a credit card number? What we'll do is, hey, is there a person whose address is mentioned, and that person's address is in California? you know, I don't have an NDA with that person, or this person is not even on the email thread. And that this person is, because his address is in California, I'm in violation of CCPA, right? So putting all of those things together and looking at all the properties, all the contexts of entities that are involved in a particular conversation, that's how you come up with an accurate sense of the risk involved.
And where or how is that context kind of configured?
Absolutely. We have, let me actually go to the insights tab. So this is where we you can look at the insights from how the customer would look at it from a runtime point of view. So you can filter by what we have as an entity linking as a stage, where when we look at the data that is coming in, we then look at that from the learning various analyzers that we have. And that's where our intelligence lies, right? Where we have built very accurate analysis engines, which are able to slice and dice the content that we have just received for analysis from various aspects. And entity linking is one key stage where we can extract the various folks or entities in a piece of content. So, for example, Rebecca, we know is a person. How do we know that Rebecca is a person? Is by tapping into for example, the Salesforce enterprise store and learning from that stage when we flip the switch on. We spend a day just learning about the enterprise. We know that Danny is an employee with the role sending, because obviously he was found in, let's say, the enterprise employee store, Entra in this case. We know that Fleming LLC is an organization. And all of this is coming from the knowledge graph, right? So the knowledge graph is where, all the entity information along with the context, their addresses, the fact that they have NDA or not, right? The various groups that exist in the directory, the identity directory, and looking at who the members of a particular group are, right? So we know the members of group. And most interesting part is that for each of these folks, we have a very good sense of the risk of this particular employee. So, for example, myself, I'm an employee at Bonify, and I can look at my risk, right? So, Bonify traces, it learns about the entities, but over a period of time, based on the activities and based on external risk intelligence, such as other stores that are tracking risks from various other contexts, we track risk from a data security point of view. We put those things together and come up with a holistic entity risk. So all of these things combined gives you a much more accurate sense of when you say a data is risky or content is risky as it leaves the organization. You have to keep in mind not just what you found in that piece of content, but who was sending it, to whom was it going to, and the various contexts associated with each of those entities that were involved.
So you mentioned earlier that it would, build in the context that like you have an NDA with a company and
Mhm.
whatnot. Is it, I mean, it's looking at like the data stores and everything. So I assume the NDA would live in there. And so it would see it and then it would automatically,
Absolutely.
kind of build that context in.
Absolutely. So each and every organization that we learn about, excuse me, we let the customer tell us what we need to pull in from that from the data store. So another interesting piece is if you go to the knowledge graph, we have this concept of a mapping, right? So and this goes back to the learning phase that we have, like the first 24 to 48 hours. The customer can tell us what do they want us to learn from these sources. So, for example, if I'm looking at my Salesforce data, then I can look at the various attributes that we are allowing the customer to map from that source into us. And we have a normalized schema, what we call the Bonify schema. So all of these numerous, we're talking Entra, Salesforce, SharePoint, in future other connectors, they all normalize to the Bonify schema. And that's how we are able to then put together those various aspects to really find out how these things come together for, let's say, compliance requirements. For example, address is important when it comes to CCPA. The fact that somebody has an NDA will allow us to look at risk at an elevated or not level, right? Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Is there like a compliance pack potentially where, like you always see this in like CSPMs or CNAPs where, you could deploy like a HIPAA compliance pack and it tells you like how compliant you are with HIPAA across everything, right? Like I feel like that might be valuable to some companies to like get that single view.
Absolutely.
Anything like that?
So we do have what we call out of the box policies. So, for example, if I go to the policy, you can look at customer trust based policies. So, these are all the customer trust policy. We have a privacy policy, which will, for example, check for location based privacies. We have other compliance, for example, GDPR, which is very location based requirements might be there, for example, more stringent in the European region, thereby having EIA leakage for GDPR, for CCPA. So we do have some of these out of the box available, and customers are welcome to use them as is, or they can customize it based on our own what we call as content checklist or CCLs, or templates that we provide out of the box. So absolutely, it is available out of the box to any customer, and based on the vertical that they serve, or the location they're at, they can customize.